Good afternoon. My name is Campbell McCrary. I'm a Vice President of Capital Markets at Amvest Capital in New York. Welcome to the Amvest Capital Inc. live webinar with NOVAGOLD Resources Inc. NOVAGOLD trades on the TSX and the NYSE American as NG, as in NOVAGOLD. Hope you'll enjoy today's program. We'll also be available in replay mode. Feel free to chat in your questions in the question pane of the GoToWebinar control panel, or simply email them in and we'll get to the questions in real time. Amvest Capital is a New York-based specialist investment management and corporate finance firm focused solely on the natural resource sector. Please note this call is for informational purposes only. We have with us today not one but two people from the company. Gregory Lang, President and CEO, and Richard Williams, Vice President, Engineering and Development. Greg has over 35 years of diverse experience in building and operating major open pit and underground mines worldwide, including time as President of Barrick Gold North America, where he also represented the company on the board of the Donlin Gold LLC. Richard Williams, Vice President, Engineering and Development, is responsible for all aspects related to the engineering and technical advancement of the Donlin Gold Project and Galore Creek Project. He spent over 30 years with Barrick Gold developing and operating major mines, and he's highly knowledgeable and an experienced leader in autoclave technology, which is planned to be used to process ores at Donlin Gold. So with that, welcome. Slides here, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to have a follow-up discussion with NOVAGOLD. I'm sure everyone is aware our presentation does contain some forward-looking materials. I'll let you read that at your leisure. NOVAGOLD is we're a very simple company. We're a single asset company. That's the Donlin Gold Project up in Alaska. Some of the attributes of this asset that make it unique are its size at almost 40 million ounces. It's got exceptional grade for an open pit gold mine. We've defined 40 million ounces, but we still have a lot of space to explore, and we'll come to that later. Jurisdiction is beginning to be a very important issue for mining companies, and we're fortunate to be up in Alaska, certainly a very pro-development state. We've got great partners. We co-own this asset with Barrick Gold, one of the largest gold producers in the industry. And the underlying land is owned by two Alaska Native corporations who are also fantastic partners for us. NOVAGOLD, by its nature, has tremendous leverage to rising gold prices. You're a financially very strong company. We've got about $126 million in cash and guaranteed receivables of $100 million from Newmont pertaining to our Galore Creek sale, 75 of which will be paid next year. We finished the federal permitting process and we're wrapping up the state permitting process. And we've got a management and board who are, certainly have a very successful record of building projects like Donlin. When you look at this company, I think it's good to look back at what we've done with the company since we restructured it in 2012. Back then, we started permitting, we updated the feasibility study, and moved forward to advance the Donlin Gold Project. In 2017, we had a targeted drill program that validated a hypothesis that we'd been working on while we were going through the permitting process. Barrick is our partner, and we're totally aligned with Barrick and have been every step of the way for the last few years as we worked our way through the permitting process. The company is now a pure play on the Donlin project. We spun out some of our copper assets in 2012 to form Nova Copper, which is now called Trilogy Metals and has over $300 million market cap. The sale of the Galore Creek project to Newmont for guaranteed consideration of $200 million and $75 when they make a construction decision was the an example of the patience we show in managing this company, and it positioned us financially so that we do not need to raise any equity until we fund our share of the Donlin project construction capital. The next few slides really highlight some of the qualities of Donlin that make it unique. At almost 40 million ounces, it's one of the largest undeveloped gold deposits in the industry. It's multiples bigger than any of the other projects that are advancing toward a development decision, and it's in one of the safest jurisdictions of any of these development projects out there. The grade at Donlin is fantastic for an open pit mine. It's about where the industry was 10 years ago, and it's better than twice the world average grade. There have been a few mines commissioned in recent years that had grades less than a gram and have been very successful. But it's Donlin's grade that gives it low cash costs and a strong production profile. If this mine were built today, it'd be one of the largest gold mines in the industry. Per the feasibility study, we'd produce 1.5 million ounces a year the first 5 years, followed by almost 3 decades of over 1 million ounces a year. This is far and away bigger than any of the other development stage gold deposits. This slide just highlights the operations that produced over 1 million ounces last year, and there's just 3. And I think that really speaks to the scarcity value of the Donlin asset. And many of these mines have been around for quite a few years and are in some pretty challenging jurisdictions, and that gives Donlin additional appeal as an investment vehicle in gold.
Greg, do you mind if I just jump in? I had 2 questions that came in. What is the current project sunk cost? How much has been put in there to date?
Well, we expense all of our costs, so we don't carry any book value for Donlin. But if you looked at it on a cash basis and not an accounting basis, both owners have spent in the neighborhood of $250 million.
And then just the other question that we get a lot of work's been done on the project, very high capital cost. Is there any possibility of developing it in stages like the way Goldstrike was developed? And is there any what's the high level comparison to Goldstrike, Greg?
Well, I think when Donlin, per the feasibility study, it was a capital investment of almost $7 billion, and that was prepared by Barrick when they were had a pretty strong balance sheet and were looking to achieve a 9 million ounce a year production rate. So it was always envisioned as a large scale, fairly capital intensive mine. Our current thinking is indeed to build it in stages, more or less a half now, half later approach. And that would take, certainly reduce the capital intensity, particularly for the first stage. And, as we're looking at means of reducing the upfront capital, there are many opportunities out there. The gas pipeline was part of the original feasibility study, and that was almost $1 billion in itself. And, if we build it in stages, we may elect to defer that pipeline to an expansion. There's other opportunities such as leasing equipment and so on that will, as we move toward updating the feasibility study, we'll address those opportunities in detail.
I think that's all for now.
All right, thank you. At this stage, I'll turn it over to Richard Williams.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just walk you through a couple slides here, touch on, as Greg mentioned, in 2017 and 18, we had a targeted drill program at site as we were doing some optimization work as we're going through this permitting portion of the project. And as a follow-up, we embarked on a second targeted program from what we learned in 2017, trying to add some value. The geology is very foundational, it's strong, And what we're trying to do here is, like most projects in this day and age, is we're seeing if we can get a higher grade, less tons, which then also helps your operating costs. So that's kind of the purpose of going within the pit limits that we currently have, and trying to see if we can't better understand a few of the controls to see if we can be more selective in our mining. So we embarked on that program. As we all know, the pandemic caused us to take a pause. We were fortunate to put new safety measures in place and new protocols, and we were able to reinitiate that program and successfully finish that in September of this year. You've probably seen the two press releases, one in August with some of the early results, assay results, and then October 26th with a next batch. And as we receive more assays, obviously we'll release those to the market too. So if you go to the next slide, we've been very pleased with some of the significant intervals that we've seen thus far in the program. And I think if you read our press releases, you'll know we are seeing a bit higher grade in some areas than we had originally modeled, with thinner sections. And so we'll, like I say, we're in early days of digesting the information from that program, but we're really excited to see how we can further enhance the project and add more value to it. This slide, just thought I'd show you kind of the land package and some of the key infrastructure pieces. And you'll also notice in the middle of the yellow section of the land package, the black arrow, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I think Greg mentioned we're on a small percentage of our land package right now, and there's obviously upside that when the time is right, we'll continue the step out exploration drilling, which we're looking forward to that trend expanding. But if you just quickly look at this picture, you can see at the bottom the Kuskokwim River. We will be barging our supplies and fuel up the river. We'll add an upriver port, the Junchek port, and then we'll put a road from the port to the mine. You'll also see on there we'll add a new airstrip because the existing airstrip will eventually be consumed by the pit. The big blue area is the pits, the green is the waste dump, and the purple is the proposed tailings storage facility. The yellow black line you see coming in from the right-hand side of the page is our proposed natural gas pipeline.
Just a question: how far to electricity, and how long is that road that needs to be built? And I guess how long is it going to be till you get to? How long will the road be to the main road?
Yeah. Okay. Good questions. So this is in Southwest Alaska, and it is remote. There really is no infrastructure, any power for the small villages or local diesel type generators. So the closest power grid is in the Anchorage Fairbanks part of the state, which is on the other side of the Alaska Range from the Donlin project. And Anchorage is, as a crow flies, about 280 miles from the site. And then if you go to the southwest, Bethel is about 155 miles as a crow flies, and it's really the regional hub for that area of Alaska. And so to get onto a power grid, we're quite far away. So one of they looked at a lot of options, and both before they finished the feasibility study, and they also looked at a lot of options during the permitting process, which is one of the NEPA steps, looking at alternatives. And where this one landed for the second updated feasibility study is on-site power generation and running a natural gas pipeline from Cook Inlet, which is over closer to Anchorage, through the Alaska Range to the project site. One advantage of that is besides powering the power plant on site, it was also it gives us a potential down the road to run the trucks on LNG or other equipment on LNG. So there's some other upsides to once you get the backbone of that pipeline in. Talking about the road. Oh, did you have a question, Kevin?
No, after the road, yeah.
So quickly on the roads, there are no roads. The roads are, again, all in the Anchorage and Fairbanks area. And so the road you see on this particular slide from the Junjik port would be new. It's about a 30-mile road with a spur road off to the airport. And so all of that will be new. So what we would do just quickly on logistics is your major supplies and fuel would be ocean barge to Bethel, as I mentioned, which is southwest. And there they'd be transloaded onto river barges, and then the river barges, which have a lower draft, would come up the river, which is how fuel and supplies get to the villages today, is on commercial barges. And so we just use that transportation highway, if you will, the river, and then once it gets to the upper port, then we would transport by tanker trucks and other vehicles to get it to site.
And just to clarify, if you were to do the two stages, could you do stage one using diesel power? And is that possible in the terms of the EIS?
Yeah. So what we did for the permitting, it's similar to what we did with the Pueblo Viejo project when I worked with Barrick. And they're the same power units. They're reciprocating engines, and they're dual fired. And so we can run them on diesel or on natural gas. And so, yes, we permitted that facility to run full out on diesel if need be. And actually that now is our backup plan. If there's any interruption to your gas supply, we can convert over and run on diesel. So that is within the limits of the EIS.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So that's all the question. Next slide is just, we touched on the exploration. You saw the land position on the previous slide. And so this just shows the two pits, Acma and Lewis, that are within the feasibility study. And then as you move up trend, the Snow, Quartz, Dome, and Ophir, we have a few drill holes from the early days in there. So we know there is some mineralization. It's just they haven't been extensively drilled out. And you know, the philosophy on most projects are you get your operation running, and then you start drilling up the trend. And I think everyone's quite familiar with the Carlin trend. And you know, in the 1950s, when Newmont started Mill 1, I'm sure none of them thought they would still be there today mining in that trend. And so that's the potential that's out there. But you know, we've been focused on getting the project as it's defined, permitted, and hopefully get it to a construction decision, and then utilize all that potential uptrend. So this one, I just touch real quick on permitting. That's always a question on projects. You know, we've been fortunate to be a bit ahead of it when the industry was in a downturn. We were out there permitting. You know, past projects, we've always had pressure to run engineering and construction in parallel, and there's always a huge risk in doing that. And so we've been successful on basically getting the major federal permits in place. You know, the final EIS is out there. The joint record of decision between the Corps and the Bureau of Land Management, which in essence was the decision for the Section 10404 wetlands permit, and also the BLM offer for their section of the lease for the right-of-way of the pipeline. We also worked with the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, and we were able to receive our special permit for that section of the pipeline that we had to, because of some of the permafrost, we had to look at using a stream-based design and get that approved through that administration. State permitting, we're quite a ways away, a ways along on that too. We have our air quality permits. We have the Title 16 fish habitat permits for the transportation corridor. We have the reclamation plan approval, the waste management permit, and a lot of the state land leases and easements. As you probably saw, some of that road is not on our land package, and so we had to get state sign off on some of those. So where are we? So we have really three major buckets that we have left. The pipeline right-of-way that resides on state land, we received that in January of this year, but there were some informal requests for review by Department of Natural Resources, and they eventually decided to reconsider that right-of-way lease, and that was the comments were addressed. It was primarily around cumulative effects, and they reissued it for public notice on September 9th, and it was a 60-day period. So that concluded a couple days ago, on November 9th, and we suspect that once they review all the comments received, that they should be in a position to reissue that right away in early part of 2021. Dam safety certifications, that's more than just the tailings dam. There's 7 dams on this project. The other 6 are primarily related to water management, and that's a very extensive program, very thorough program with the Dam Safety Coordinator of Alaska, where we have to, we had to submit our application, and then we do a preliminary design basis, and then you go to a detailed design basis, and then you have to get to issue for construction drawings. And so we kind of held off on that until we had some certainty on some of the other permitting areas, because it's a quite large expenditure. 2019, we went into the field again to collect some more data to move from the preliminary to the detailed dam safety. And we were chased out. I think everyone remembers the big wildfires in Alaska a couple of years ago. We got back in towards the end of that season and completed, a portion of that program. For 2020, the decision was made by the owner companies to proceed with the geological program that I discussed on a few slides ago, and defer the dam safety until we get past that, and then we'll get back into the field, collect the remaining data, and then start into the detailed engineering and get to the issue for construction. Water rights is the other one there, and that one should go out for public notice by the end of this year. And so that kind of gives you a snapshot of some of the steps left in the state permitting.
Just one question, Richard, that if you were so in summary on the state permitting in progress, if you had to manage our expectations, investor expectations, what would be the range, months range on each of these? Are we talking years, months? Where would you like to be with these 3 subheadings? And
okay, yeah. So the pipeline right away, like I said, that had been issued once. We're pretty confident that will be favorable and reissued, and I see that the first part of the year. So that's a short term. The dam safety, that's a little longer. We need to go back into the field. one of the challenges is seasonal, and we do drill in the winter, and sometimes that's more favorable because of some of the conditions in the lower parts of the valley. And so some of that work, we'll either wait for winter, or we'll have to. There are other methods of helicopter support and drop down into those wetter areas. So that one's not months off. That's a couple of years off to totally complete. And then the water permits, as I mentioned, that should go out for public notice by the end of the year, and by mid-year or so, we would hope to see the final permits issued.
Are these on the critical path?
They're not really on the critical path. We still have engineering work to do for update the feasibility and then get into basic and detail engineering. We're, as I talked about, this geological program, although it's an enhancement, it's still critical that if we're successful with some of the concepts we've been thinking about, we'll update that model, and that will then go to the mining group to do the mine plans, and then the process will, they'll check their parameters, make sure everything's good. So it looks like particularly the pipeline and the water rights are fine, no problem. The dam safety, we have the time to run that in parallel with some of this other work that we're doing. And so, as long as we keep addressing those as we are, they should not take over the critical path.
Okay, thanks.
So, Greg, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've approached, stakeholder engagement, how we deal with the communities, and why we've been able to successfully navigate the permitting process. We've always taken to heart the importance of keeping the communities on side. We have various education and training programs in place to prepare the residents around the Donlin project for future employment opportunities at the mine. We have health and safety programs, not just for the mine site, but also tools that people can take back to the villages they live in. And I think the same applies to the environmental stewardship. Many of our projects are obviously related to the mine site, but we've also sponsored various initiatives for the communities around the Donlin project. In corporate governance, very important to us, and you'll see that in the activities that we've taken with our board, the refreshment of the board, and the ongoing governance processes that we take to a very high level. The Donlin project is, we have long-term agreements with our Native corporation partners. And this came about that this project is on private land owned by two Native corporations. And this came about when I think Richard Nixon was in the White House, for those of you that don't want to date themselves. And the federal government and the state of Alaska needed to resolve the overlapping land claims to access the petroleum on the North Slope. And the Native Claims Settlement Act did that. And the area around the Donlin mine was known to have mineral potential. So this project was designated for mining and turned over to the Native corporations for their own economic self-determination. One of the key aspects of the Native Claims Settlement Act is that any revenues from any Native corporation are shared 70-30 with the others. So it's a way of spreading the wealth throughout the state of Alaska. So not just the Native corporations that own the land for us, but the profits from the mine will be shared with all of the Native corporations.
Is there any opposition or any forces to join together, either Native or environmental groups, looking at this? And I guess the news of Pebble, maybe that kind of spills over to you. Any comment on that?
Well, I think I mean it's North America, the United States. There's somebody who's always opposed to something, and and there are environmental NGOs that have followed our process, have appealed some of our permits, and the state has always upheld the permits they've issued. So I wouldn't say there's no opposition, but Donlin has never been cause celeb like some of the other projects. As far as we know, there's no organized opposition in the lower 48, and it's out there, but it's not an issue that we really lose any sleep over. And I think a lot of what's certainly helped us is the native ownership of the land. The Alaska Native groups are, they're a very powerful political force up in Alaska, and them having an owner's interest in the project, I think, deflects potential opposition that's come toward other projects.
Okay.
And this is, this slide is really, and part of the reason we have the Native support is we engage with them on many different levels. These slides illustrate one of our initiatives, which was, helping the villages remove hazardous household goods, from their landfills and just making the villages safer. We also have scholarship programs, various community cleanup initiatives. And we support the youth programs, throughout the entire region where the people that would work at the mine live. So we're a very visible presence in these communities, and that is something, again, that's to your earlier question about opposition. These are relationships that you need to develop long before you need them, and Donlin has been actively doing this since they got involved with the project over 20 years ago. And we've touched on this a little bit, but this is, another example of the shared values that we have with our Native corporation partners, and we will continue to do this. All right, and turning to our other partner, Barrick. This slide is it just highlights a slide from Barrick's recent Q3 update presentation, and they highlighted the results of the drill program. And through the text, if you listen to Barrick's remarks, they're steadily bringing this project up the value chain, and we're pleased with their involvement. I think since the merger with Rand, that's reinvigorated the company, and Mark Bristow has been out to the site, he's a geologist, very keen interest in geology, and certainly appreciates the scarcity of a large scale gold deposit like Donlin.
Some people have wanted to know a little bit more about the Barrick relationship. Is it 50-50, and how do you split? How are expenses split, and can you give us a little more color on the operating agreement in form and in practical implementation?
Sure. In Donlin Gold LLC, which holds the Donlin asset, is 50% owned by us and 50% owned by Barrick. Donlin Gold is managed by a board of directors. There's 2 representatives from each company on the board. I was chairman last year, and this year Catherine Raw is chairman. So the chairmanship rotates between the companies every year. Neither of us have any rights that the other party doesn't have. It's a true 50-50 partnership in every sense of the word, and certainly that includes financial contributions to the project.
Okay, thank you.
This slide highlights somewhat the importance of the work that's been done at Donlin. If you were to find discovery like Donlin today, by the time you drill it, assay it, do all the environmental work, permitting work, feasibility work, and so on, it's almost a 20-year process. And I think that really speaks to, one, how far we've come with moving this asset up the value chain, and also how scarce projects like this are in the industry. I think this is one of the few genuinely near shovel-ready projects that are out there. And it's, mining and permitting in the United States, particularly permitting, it's a very thorough, very transparent process, and it is time consuming. And I think, as Richard noted earlier, it was a fantastic way to spend our energy when the industry was out of favor. So we've come through the permitting process. We've got a lot of cash in the bank, and I like the way the company is positioned today.
Can you give a clear picture of, it's always about cost. What's the price tag on this and the timeline, I guess, as a lump build or as a stage? And are you confident, there's enough money in the global financial system to allocate it here?
Sure. I think, let's, make the math easier. Let's just say that it's, if we build it in stages, and it's total capital somewhere around $4.5 billion, but just in the interest of simplicity, $2 billion to each owner. I would anticipate that we would, look to borrow as much as of our share of that $2 billion as we can, so that we would minimize the dilution on our shareholders. And if we financed bulk of it and said we needed to come up with, say, 30% or roughly $600 million, that's not, to me, a very difficult task. We did our last equity raise in 2012 at $9.50 a share. We raised $330 million, and back then we were starting permitting. We didn't have the feasibility study was just being completed, and the company was in a lot different position than it is today. So we've used the proceeds of our last equity raise and the Galore sale to minimize the dilution on the shareholders. And in current price environments, financing an asset like this with a partner like Barrick in North America, I think certainly seems very, very doable to us. Some of our major shareholders are sovereign wealth funds, and they've expressed interest to us in participating when the time comes. So I think we'll be in a great position to raise our share of the capital.
Okay, thanks.
We've touched on the Treasury. This year with the drilling, we're spending about $31 million. That's higher than we've spent in recent years, and that's largely because of the drilling. As permitting has wound down, we've been spending additional money on drilling. But $30 million was a big year for us. If we have another year like that and embark on the feasibility study, that number could go up to maybe 50. So, any way you look at it, with 126 million in cash today and 75 coming in next summer and another 25 2 years after that, we're in great shape financially, and just don't see any need to raise equity until we go to fund our share of construction. And this is, a very important aspect. Leverage, as rising gold prices help all gold companies, but certainly a project like Donlin that's fairly capital intensive. We had positive rates of return at $1,300 gold, but I personally don't think any mine ought to be built at $1,300 gold. But, now we're sitting near $1,900, and the value of this asset continues to go up. We're long-term gold bulls, and I think we've always taken the view that do this thing properly, whatever time it takes, and gold is going higher in the future, and our patience will be rewarded. We're really an institutional quality gold stock. We've got a market cap just under $4 billion US. Electrum, as many of you that might have been on the earlier call, is Dr. Thomas Kaplan's gold vehicle. Fidelity is principally Will Danoff's Contra fund. And then the other shareholders you're seeing there. And we're about 60% of our stock is with the top 10. Many of these have been in the story a long time. and they look at us as an unexpiring warrant on an ounce of gold.
Hate to bring up a negative topic, but it's on everyone's mind. The short selling attacks. I guess, any comment and, really an update, and what was the effect on the stock, and have you been able to rectify the situation?
Well, let's start with the short selling attack. It's NOVAGOLD's position that this was not bona fide research, but it was securities fraud, plain and simple. We've published very detailed replies to some of the assertions made in the JCAP report, and if you have the curiosity, I certainly encourage you to read them. It was an interesting report to dissect because it was so full of falsehoods and misstatements. But at any rate, we believe we have been victimized by securities fraud. We have filed suit in New York. We've been through the early pleadings and motions. The counsel representing JCAP has moved to dismiss the case. Those motions were denied, and we've now moved into discovery. So we think we have a very valid case. Our board of directors.
How much is that costing, the lawsuit?
An interesting thing. We haven't disclosed it in great detail, but you note from our earlier slide that our spending level is right at our budget this year. And I think the lawsuit, which is a couple $100,000 since we started, we've offset that because we have virtually no travel expenses these days. So we think it does cost money to litigate. It's to us, it's part a matter of principle, and part we feel our case is very solid. But it's in the scheme of what it takes to run NOVAGOLD, it's fairly minor expense.
Okay, Greg, what do you tell people when you hear a sentiment such as we only have a short gold window, maybe 5 or 10 years? When are you going to get those shovels moving? What's taking so long? What do you say?
Well, there's certainly a couple areas there. In part, I guess I'll go back a year or so ago when we were had Dr. Bristow at site, and he got acquainted with the work that we'd been doing, and frankly got intrigued by the work. So that was a little over a year ago. We put together the drill program that Richard talked about that we've wrapped up, and we're taking that data and updating the model and improving our understanding. So I think two things that, as I look at this, I'd rather be patient and do it right than rush into a construction period before we have adequately worked through the new model, new feasibility study. And it's I think we have a partner. We have a great partner, and I think the new Barrick executives that came from Rand bring a lot to the party. But I think it was also a period of educating them. This was mining up in Alaska is different than what they're used to, and it was part an educational process. So I think we're moving forward in a very disciplined and methodical fashion. As Richard noted, the news flow from us for the next couple of months will be, updating everybody on drill results, and then we'll prepare a new model and, run mine planning scenarios on that. And then I think, going further into next year, we may do a little bit more drilling, or we'll lay the background work to prepare to update the feasibility study. And as far as the gold cycle, I think there's a lot more reasons to believe that gold is going higher than going back the other way. I think, with all of the monetary easing throughout the entire global financial system, people are going to turn more and more to gold. And I don't believe it's going to be a 5-year cycle up and then cycle down. I think, higher prices are here to stay. Everything is choppy these days, but gold clearly is finding support around $1,900 an ounce. And I think, it's our view that gold will be higher in the future, and that, those days are not that far ahead. And in the context of the time and the money we've invested in Donlin, another 6-8 months or a year to make sure we've got everything absolutely right. Money well spent. And I don't have to think too hard about projects that rushed into construction decisions and failed. And that's, we don't operate that way.
Thank you.
And I think this, this slide just wraps it up. It's a big asset, great grade. As Richard pointed out, we've just barely scratched the surface of the land holdings at Donlin. I like working up in Alaska. Alaska is, by the way, a conservative state, and in the U.S. election, the Republicans prevailed. Senators Sullivan and Murkowski have long been staunch advocates of the Donlin project. It's great to have partners. A lot of companies like ours wish they had a well-heeled partner like Barrick, and we've got a great partner there, and we're completely aligned with how we think the time and way to move this project is forward. Key permits are in hand, and our shareholders have been behind this company a long time and are very loyal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to jump into some audience and Amvest questions. We have about 10, 15 minutes. Are there silver credits?
There are no silver credits. It's purely gold, which in some ways simplifies the metallurgy.
Is there anything else besides gold in any significant portions?
No, it's a pure gold mine.
What's your opinion of your share price performance and compared to others similar?
I think, for the last few years, NOVAGOLD has been one of the better performing gold stocks. And I think that's as we've moved the asset up the value chain and our partner got more interested. I think those were, factored into our strong share price performance for the last couple of years. The JCap short attack, probably cost us 30% of our market cap, in just a few weeks after trading. Somewhat to my surprise, we've recovered most of that. I thought it might take longer, but we're now trading, just a little bit higher than when, that happened. So I think the share price has recovered well from the short attack, but I don't believe it's as high as it would have been had we not had that fraudulent interference.
What is your reaction when someone says, when can we expect a construction decision? Can you commit to a range there? Years, decades? What do you say?
Well, certainly not decades. We're the first steps that we've laid out are update the geologic model, and that's been going very well. We think that the strong results that Richard articulated will enhance the economics of the project. So that'll take us into the second quarter next year. So I think sometime in the second or third quarter, the owners will be in a position to say, yeah, the time is right to spend the money to update the feasibility study. And we've taken the view that a proper engineered feasibility study for an asset like Donlin is many tens of millions of dollars of engineering and related work. And we've been of the opinion that we don't want to undertake that work unless we have a reasonable certainty that the project is going forward. So I think toward the middle of next year, we'll be in a position to say, is it time to update the feasibility study and go forward? And with the permits in hand, we have authorization to work at the site. As Richard noted, and he was involved with Goldstrike over the years, you can begin construction while you're doing the final studies. And that's not a decision we would take lightly, and we would only make that decision in a very bullish price environment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Gabe and Stu. I've got some more a little more technical questions coming at at the two of you. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, just we have Richard on with us, so I appreciate you joining the call today. And just wanted to maybe touch on what, if you could touch on what the thickness of the sedimentary cover is in the area and what is the composition of the gold ore in that sedimentary rock?
Yeah, so about 80% of the ore is actually in the intrusives, and about 20% of the mineralization is in the sediments, if you will. So what is sediments? The gray wacky is the host rock, and then you have some shell, and it's not a geological term, but we call them mixed sed. So you've got a combination of both mixed in. And so, you know, there isn't an oxide cap on this deposit like some of the deposits years ago that we could, you know, start up, say, a heap leach. Goldstrike was that way. Started up with a heap leach and then eventually got into the sulfidic ore. The mineralization is primarily arsenopyrite, and and most of that is in a quartz carbonate sulfide vein network, and then there is some sulfidation mixed in there that disseminates the gold. So really, you have your stripping of the overburden, which is pretty much mineralization free, and you're basically right into the sulfidic ore. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. It seems also you've got a good handle on the controls of the higher grade, or I guess of the various zones. Can you touch on, you know, what's the current sort of defined dimensions of those high grade zones in both the units, and which unit is more favorable in terms of gold mineralization?
Yeah, so as I said, the controls around the intrusives, because it's a more contained shape, if you will, and pretty easy to define. And we have a high level of confidence, obviously, in that, in those intrusives. Some of the concept we actually are looking at is in the sediments where we've seen these high grade hits, and you couldn't always geologically tie them together, which is, you know, what the purpose of some of these targeted programs that we're doing. And some of the high grade hits are quite high. So we've seen higher grade in those sediments, but in narrow structures, if you will. And it's probably more of a vein network versus a defined shape like an intrusive is. And so it's really just getting even better understanding of the predictability of some of those higher grade, thinner structures, if you will, corridors of mineralization, which then, if we can selectively mine that, you know, that's going to lift the value. And it goes to Campbell's question on stage building. Obviously, if you get that grade up, you can start smaller and still get a nice production profile to offset a lot of that infrastructure that you have to put in for any size project.
Yeah, thanks. I just one more follow up on what you said, and I'll pass it over to Stu. So, in terms of this, the level of study that you believe that you're at today, in terms of the faults and the other structures in the area, where do you believe you're at? Sort of 1 to 10 being 10 being you've got it down, you know, you've got a full understanding of it.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, different parts you're probably at 10. And other parts, maybe you're in an 8. So it's not that we're miles away. It's fine tuning. And you know, I'll be quite honest. I've worked on deposits where eventually you just had to say, look, I've got my downside protected, but there's no way I'm going to drill this deposit off on 10, for instance, 10 meter centers. And so you convince yourself that there's probably going to be some upside that you just can't economically determine, and so that might be that last 9 to 10 on some of those areas.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation, guys. Just on exploration, when would you expect the final assays of the current program to be finished? I know you've just received the first 25 holes.
Yeah, so not to use the pandemic, but reality is a lot of the assay labs, and we're not the only ones suffering from it, are backlogged. And so, you know, we the last few could trickle in, you know, into early part of next year. That doesn't stop us from working in parallel, and like I said, some of the lithologies and some of the, you know, the rock types and some of the structures and whatnot, we will start looking at and get on top of prior to getting all of the assays in. But yeah, as far as it'll be the first part of next year to get the full package of assays in.
Gotcha. And given you have such a big resource, what was the purpose of this drill program?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it was more, you know, you probably saw the terminology, looking for the high grade extensions. And so, you know, you look at your deposit, you see a high grade hit here, one here, and you're trying to tie them together. And if they tie together, you know, you have a boon, right? Particularly if it's in that early 5 to 10 year pit. And so some of those are, you know, outside of the, if you will, the guts of the deposit. So part of the program was looking at that. The other was looking and testing some of the controls, as mentioned to Gabriel, you know, in the sediments. And we have some theories that we're trying to tie the dots together. And if we are successful in tying those in and understanding if there is a geological shape we can put around them, it gives you a higher level of predictability on that particular part of it. And so that's why it's a targeted program, right? We understand the bulk of this deposit. We're just trying to see if we can get that last enhancement out prior to going into the next feasibility study update.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. And then just one last question for me on tailings, and you know, some companies have looked at various tailing scenarios. You know, what did you guys look at for tailings, the proposed tailings area? You know, there's people talking about dry stacking and wet tailings. And
yeah, it's a good question, and obviously, you know, that's a major focus in our industry right now. And as we've been permitting, you know, we had the Mount Polly's and the Brazilian incidents, and a lot of rules changing. And so, as part of the U.S. NEPA process for permitting, you know, we had to go through all those alternatives, which we had gone through anyways, but we had to lay them out in a process to show that the alternative we were proposing was the least impact process. So we looked at stacked tails, looked at obviously the conventional, which we ended up with, looked at thickened tails. And they did, you know, prior to my time, they did a site selection, which all projects go through, trying to figure out where and what's the best the place to put a tailings facility to get the highest capacity per meter of raise on your dam versus, you know, some of this very steep valleys that we experienced in my barrack days up down in South America. So we went through all those, like I said, even before the permitting process, and then again through the permitting process, and obviously now with ICMM and whatnot out, we'll do one last look as we roll into a final feasibility study.
thank you. Campbell.
We've gone on exactly an hour, so we're going to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for sending in your questions and for tuning in. And, you know, I'll turn it over to you, Greg and Richard, for a closing statement, but I'll sort of lead it with, do you think the Pierre Lassonde curve is still alive and well and working? And do you think a new investor should be able to see price appreciation over the next 8 years, or so as you kind of move to production, were that to be the case? So what can we expect as an investment?
Well, I think certainly you're not looking at NOVAGOLD unless you believe gold prices are going significantly higher. I think the Lassonde curve you referred to has gold in many thousands of dollars an ounce higher than it is today. So I think certainly if we find ourselves in that circumstance, you could easily see NOVAGOLD share price doubling if gold prices genuinely move into $2,500, $3,000 an ounce. Lucas Pipes has the analyst with B. Riley has a $30 target on us when gold hits $25 an ounce. So if you have a positive view on gold price, NOVAGOLD is certainly a company I ought to take a hard look at.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Please share your feedback. It'll go straight to management at NOVAGOLD, and do follow NOVAGOLD and that matter Amvest Capital on the usual social media places. So with that, thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.